my God.
Welcome back to another episode of That's When I Knew the podcast, where real people have real conversations about the journey towards building a meaningful career in tech sales. I'm your host, Robert Creighton, and today I have another guest. Listeners, viewers, y'all probably getting used to me say everyone's an awesome guest, but that's just because I know great people and I'm having great people on the show. But before I introduce our guest today, a couple housekeeping items. Please subscribe to the show, whether on YouTube, whether on your podcast listening service, Spotify, Apple. Show some love, like, comments, and it's greatly appreciated. And for all the supporters, again, it's Thanksgiving season, it's the holidays. I'm so thankful for you all. So, with that said, today we have Mr. Justin Solis. Now, let me tell you what he does before, I tell you how we met. And so this person is currently an account executive at Pave, which is doing some interesting things. And we're going to pick his brain about some things related to compensation. That's what they do there. So I'm excited to learn from him in that regard. But he's also a sales trainer for a company called FlockJ, which helps underrepresented groups, break into tech. And he's also the co-founder of a company called Blue Blaze Partners, which is a crypto cloud mining provider. And he's looking to democratize that space. And so we're going to discuss that as well. But, I came across this person as I was also a trainer for FlockJ. And, Justin, he came on the screen, sharp dude, giving back. And I was like, wow, another brother giving back, another brother that's in the tech sales space and a leader in this space. That's awesome. And then once we connected, it turns out we got some things in common, San Jose State Spartan, yes, sir. Raised in, the peninsula. I was born in the peninsula, in tech sales. So we hit it off, and I'm really excited to have him on the show today to pick his brain on some things. Real sharp guy, and he's going to share his knowledge with us today. So without further ado, Justin, welcome to That's When I Knew the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, man. Very grateful for the opportunity and super stoked to be chatting with you. And thank you for all the kind words. And I'll say the same about you. It was always super impressive, every time that we got a chance to share a room at FlockJ, and really appreciate it.
All good, man. Another thing we got in common, I see you're an art enthusiast. I didn't realize this. Last time we spoke, we weren't on the camera, so he has the nice art piece back there. I can't really tell what it is.
Little Keith Haring there.
Oh wow, okay, that's awesome. I love art. All right, well let's take it back, because this podcast, we're not just suits and ties. Although people don't really wear suit and ties in tech, but you know what I mean? Like, there's a human aspect to you, and I want to capture that on today's episode of That's When I Do the Podcast. So can you talk a little bit about just your upbringing and, where you grew up and what your upbringing was like, generally speaking?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say my upbringing was like really defined by sort of like constant change. When I was born, my mom was like 19, my dad was like 22. He just got out of the military and was like taking college and night classes. And my mom actually ended up getting caught up in kind of like drugs and crime, ended up, becoming a heroin addict and going upstate for armed robbery. And that was like a really tough part of my childhood. So I grew up like with a single dad in a multi-generational household in the Bronx.
Hello there. My name is Cardi B, and I am from the Bronx.
My dad was an immigrant, and then, he worked really, really hard. And so by the time I was like 7 or 8, he had actually remarried to my mom, who was my stepmom, who I call my mom. She pretty much raised me, who was an attorney. So when I was like 10 years old, we moved from living in the Bronx to moving to Menlo Park, which was like very much like a culture shock for me. It was very different, sort of being exposed to people from like a very different socioeconomic background and very different concerns in life and very sort of like different upbringings. And that was kind of the first time where I was like seeing kind of the ceiling sort of expand as to like what you could be in life and what you could achieve. Like that was the first time that I ever really got around that. And that made me like have a very strong desire to want to like get a better education, try to get the best job. When you're young, you kind of only see one very linear path, right? So just like, I got to get a degree, got to get an MBA or a law degree or something. And so I worked really hard in middle school, ended up going to boarding school for a little while. And, when I started college, I kind of started to slip a little bit, kind of like always struggled with my mental health. And I think that was a huge contributor, and sort of like dealing with like imposter syndrome in school. I did like exceedingly well in some subjects and really poorly in others. And basically, like, I ended up dropping out of school to pursue music for a while, and was like a tour DJ and was doing like merchandise and stuff like that, and always kind of had an entrepreneurial mindset, but didn't really have the sort of operational background to get things done, and found myself like in my mid 20s, like sort of disenchanted with the things I had been pursuing and no degree, and then I luckily kind of like fell into tech
So it's a
sales.
second. Well, hey,
Yeah.
and you're one of the leaders in this space, man. It seems like everyone I have on this show is, big on LinkedIn, but like you also have some really thoughtful posts on LinkedIn. And so I'm going to encourage the listeners to go check you out, connect with you there as well. But I want to take a step back because, that's actually you kind of have a really interesting story. The fact that like you come from very, very humble beginnings, but also at an early age, you were, put into an environment where it's like a lot of privilege and like a lot of, opportunity. What would you say was the difference mindset when you think about like your humble beginning side and like, perhaps you even have family, like what is the difference in mindset from that space into the Menlo Park? And for people who don't know Menlo Park, you have Atherton, I know of Atherton. Atherton is like one of the richest zip codes in America, and Menlo Park is down the street. And so, what was the like the difference in even mindset and how people lived in these different areas, would you say?
I would say like one of the big things for me that I noticed originally that was like kind of hurtful for me was sort of like the disparity. Like, there's, about like the hierarchy of needs. So like, like the concept of leisure didn't even exist for people of color until very recently, because leisure is a privilege that comes when you have the opportunity to think about relaxing, to think about pursuing higher results. Whereas with the environment that I came from, people were trying to survive. You were glad to have any kind of job at all. You know what I mean? You were glad to be able to pay your rent, to make sure that you were fed, right? Whereas these people, those things were all foregone conclusions. And so the way that they, like their kids, right, like all the activities they would do, what I mean, piano and all these things, like that was like super foreign to me. And then also the way people thought about money, like the way I grew up, because you had so little, you always wanted to show what you had. You know what I mean? And so like, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I was buying like Gucci belts and Louis belts and things like that and trying to like flex. And then now it's funny that you get around people who come from wealth, they would kind of look down on you for sort of displaying your wealth in that way. And that was sort of like an adjustment that I had to learn about culturally, where people just their perception of money and how to accumulate it, how to spend it was like just vastly different. And that was something that took me kind of like years to sort of catch on to.
No, absolutely, man. You make a great point about that. And like the Bay Area is really interesting place because, you grew up in the Bronx, which is a tough area on the East Coast, and then moved to the West Coast and went to like an affluent area. But even just in the Bay, you have those two areas like within 30 minutes of each other, like whether it be East Palo Alto or Oakland or different areas, Richmond, and you're absolutely right. Like that idea of leisure, if you really think about it, like in Oakland, you don't really have a lot. Like in the East Oakland, like you don't really have a lot of. You don't have golf courses. You don't have tennis
At
courts.
country clubs, right? Like where they
You
at?
don't have those things. You have liquor stores. You got and obviously it's not that bad. I don't want there's other things, but it definitely is kind of, I can imagine, a culture shock for you. But what would you say are the benefits, like the pros? Because I think the cons is obvious. Like when you don't have that idea of leisure, when you're stressed out, like that's just bad for your health, first and foremost. But like, what would you say the benefits are from being raised and like having that kind of be a part of your identity, like that humble beginnings? What's the benefit of that when talking about a career?
I would say like just the perspective. Like I
Mm-hmm.
think because of where I come from and because of like, the sort of struggles that I've experienced in my life, it makes me extremely grateful. Like I'm extremely grateful to be where I am in my career. And honestly, it inspires me to work hard. Like anybody else, like I'm a human being. Like sometimes you
Mm-hmm.
lose sight of those things, but every now and then when I'm like, feeling down about my life, whether it be like, "Ah, I have so much prospecting to do, or I have like, I feel overwhelmed with the amount of deals that I have in my pipeline, combining that with the sort of things that are going on in my personal life, I think back to what my dad was going through at my age, trying to, be a single dad and finish school. Like, I honestly am very lucky. And no matter what's going on in my life, at the end of the day, like I'm in a great place, comparatively speaking. And so having that has made me extremely grateful. And then I think growing up in sort of the affluent area in the latter half of my life, the really benefit was the exposure to so many different things. Like I started playing high school lacrosse, you know what I mean? Like I had never even heard of that until I was like, I don't know, 13 years old. I didn't even know what it was, right? And getting the opportunity to play golf and things like that, and it might seem insignificant, but it's helped me a lot in my career and in the latter half of my life, because it's like it's a point where I can relate to people and not feel like an outsider. You know what I mean? And it's nice to be able to have those things as a part of me, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, definitely, definitely, definitely. It's definitely that's the blessing of it. But there's also, like you said, that you acknowledge the blessing even from the perceived bad parts, like growing up in humble beginnings. Like at the end of the day, it's really it's all about perspective and your faith. But everything could be a blessing depending on how you look at it. The glass half empty or half full, right?
Perspective, right? It's everything.
One thing that I don't know if this is too early on in the show, we're going to get into the future of things, but you touch on something that's kind of like we need to be talking about, like how you say you're grateful and you're appreciative. I think some companies take advantage of that, cause I'm the same, I mean, I got my first job, I'm making six figures, but like you got coworkers making double six figures,
Right,
they making
right.
six figures with a two. At the beginning, you know what I mean? Like, and some companies take advantage of that. And so it's like, that's another thing too, is like, whose responsibility is it to educate, is especially, when we talk about how the sales industry needs to be more diverse and companies are going to start wanting more diversity and they're going out and finding people from under tapped pools. Like, what's the process there? Is like, I mean, obviously I would assume, business is business. So if they can get cheaper work, that they're not going to just offer people more money. But I think it's up to us, to like make sure podcast things you're doing with FlockJ, things you're doing just as a leader and being vocal on your social networks. I think this is helping, like educate people on, hey, I know you're happy you got into tech, but don't keep your eyes open, talk to people, and make sure that you're not being taken advantage of, because really your humble beginnings, Justin, and like which giving you this great perspective and appreciation for just tech, this grit, this work ethic. This is all stuff that really likely is making you a top performer and bringing in so much money, and that there's value to that. And so, any thoughts there? I know I just kind of went on my high horse, but any
No, like I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense and really resonates with me. Like I spent the first almost 3 years of my career working for a company, being like seriously underpaid, but because I was so grateful and because I had basically gotten into tech with no background, I felt very lucky to just have a job. Like to put into perspective, I think I applied to like 100 something jobs on Angel List before I got my first job, and I was so misinformed. And to your point, right, like you said, like it's the onus is on us to go out there and find resources and educate ourselves, because I didn't know the difference between an SDR and an AE and an AM, and I was just like submitting applications. And when I started there, they put me on like a $3,000 a month, for 90 days, like a probationary 1099 contract. And I just took that. I never even occurred to me that that would not be copacetic. And I was happy with all the raises that I got as long as I was getting paid the most. But like it wasn't. I didn't know what the market value was. And luckily, there's like so many great resources out there today now to help you understand these things. Like RepView is a really great one, where people can come and contribute their salary. So yeah, I would say like you said, just educate yourself, understand like what market value is, understand like what your work you're doing and how it compares to the work at other similar organizations, and make sure that you're being compensated fairly.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Question for you. So going back to your upbringing, you moved around quite a bit from the East Coast, West Coast. I believe you also spent some time in the South in Texas.
Yes.
How would you say that's kind of impacted you as a professional today?
Good question. I would say honestly, like the having moved around a lot and experiencing sort of like those different socioeconomic environments is what's made me good at sales, right? Because at the end of the day, like what is sales about if not like building rapport and mirroring. And the exercise of mirroring is one that you have to practice a lot when you're constantly moving to different places where people speak different, where people like different things, where they eat different food. I mean, like, couldn't be more different. Living in Austin, in the Bronx, in Palo Alto, and going to school in Monterey. All those experiences taught me how to like quickly adapt and how to like be the person that the person in front of me wants me to be. And I think that's like, the same skills that I use today in sales.
Got it. And for the listeners out there who might not be aware of like this tactic of mirroring, can you share a little bit about like what that like high level overview of what mirroring is all about and the value it plays in being in sales?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, people oftentimes feel most comfortable with people who are like themselves, right? So, like, to put it very simply, sometimes you'll get on the phone and you're talking with someone who's a real fast talker, you know what I mean? And they're really to the point. They like to cut you off, right? So, if you come in super slow and you try to really sort of elongate your statements and tell them things they don't want to hear, you're going to lose their interest, right? So, immediately you have to read that prospect, come back, be curt, make sure that you're kind of operating on the same wavelength. And so that's kind of like the basic concept of mirroring is just being able to like assess sort of these sort of minute traits with the people you're speaking to and the way that they communicate, and then communicating in the same fashion.
Got it. Got it. I need to do that more often. No.
It's hard for me. I'm a naturally fast talker. That's my preferred mode.
Yeah.
And I've had to had it pointed out to me many times on like gong recordings and stuff. Like, dude, like if you put this on 1.25, 1.5x speed, you can't even hear you.
Right. I think for me, I am a more of a slow talker. I don't know if that's just how I am, but I'm like thinking, I think you can see the wheels turning in my head. So I'm not as quick, you know what I mean? But, but,
I take out a page out of your book. I need to operate more like that.
there's a balance, but hey, as long as you're closing deals, who cares? Right. So,
Right.
but,
100%.
okay. You talked about, how when you went to college, like culture shock, imposter syndrome, and college was tough for you. You want to talk a little bit about what that experience was like, and before we get into like where you are today and building your career in sales.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say, first of all, like when I left school, I really wanted to move back to California, but I was already been living in Texas for a number of years, so it would have cost me like out-of-state tuition, and so I kind of was forced to go to University of Texas in San Antonio. They had this thing called the CAP program, so you can get into UT Austin if you just like went to any other UT and got like a 3.5 GPA. So it was just like a lot of pressure, and then I really didn't want to be there. I kind of moved there, lived on my own. I didn't make it in the dorms, and so like I was saying, I kind of struggled with my mental health a little bit, like out the gate. Like I was just kind of like going through dealing with depression and things like that, and so it was just really hard for me to keep up academically. And then kind of coming from a space where I had always been like very much like an academic high achiever. I kind of defined my self-worth in academics, and because of like a lack of knowledge about different ways to make money, different ways to be successful, in my mind, failing at college was failing, period. Like there was just no way to recover. And so I just like kept trying and failing and kept like having these like moments of success and ups and downs. I was in college for I don't know, like overall like 5 years in and out, like at various institutions. And so I think like when I what the career that I ended up going into, and leaving college for was music. And I think the reason why I pursued it is because I found a modicum of success, and it made me feel sort of that affirmation, like something I could do. Because I started DJing in college, and then ended up kind of turning that into a business, and just and moving with that. But I think like looking back on it, I have a lot of regret about like not being able to stick it out. And I think with like the mindset I have now, I could have been successful, but it's just like a tribute to immaturity and just sort of like my upbringing and not having sort of like the tools that I needed to kind of like get through it.
Yeah, everybody has their own journey. You know what I mean? What did you study in college again? Like, what was your main interest in college?
I started out with art history,
Okay.
and then I was doing psychology, and I think psychology was probably my most favorite, and that's the one where I stuck with for the longest.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. 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 And then you got into DJing. Yeah, that's dope. That's has the DJing had any impact on you as a seller? Because all of these things are transferable. Like when you're training people who are like looking to transition from a non-tech career into tech sales, what's the first thing you tell them? what skills are transferable? How can you redefine these skills? So my question to you is like, how does DJ, where's the DJ come in tech sales? Like, how does that help you? You know?
I wouldn't say like actually like the skills necessary to like get down on the ones and twos are transferable, but from the perspective of like running the business, like during the time I was a DJ, I helped to run a DJ school. So I got the chance to do like social media marketing and get to understand that. And then
Okay.
I would also put together a lot of events, and that's where like I really learned about aligning needs of stakeholders, right? Because I'd basically have like the money guy, and then I would have to get food vendors together, and then I have to make sure that like a merch is set up, and then have all the artists there. So putting things like that together was like a lot of like conversation, aligning needs, making sure everyone feels valued and like they're getting the best out of the situation, like everyone feels like it's a win. It's like very similar to orchestrating like a more complex deal cycle, right? So it's I would say
Okay.
that was definitely transferable.
No, that's dope. I got not to speak for you, but I got another one because I feel like DJs, when they're playing that music, it's energy. You feel me? Like there's bad DJs, there's good DJs, and you got to be able to read the room. You got to be able to read the energy, and that's a skill that could is you probably didn't even think
I
of, but
never
like,
did.
you know what I
Right.
mean? So,
100%.
um, and that's big on me because I think a lot of people, especially people from underrepresented groups, people with that don't come from, the traditional path, we often don't understand the value that our previous life experiences are actually bringing to us in total. Like as a seller, Justin, like the main thing that we need to communicate to buyers is like return on investment. Usually like they're all thinking about what's the return on investment. And, our life is a series of investments, deposits into whatever experiences we're doing. But sometimes we don't even think about what was the return on that or even know how to calculate it. You know what I mean? Because it's so like not even tangible. It's intangible. It's like, like, you know what I mean? Even for me personally, like I studied sociology and minored in business because like San Jose State was super impacted. I had like a 2.5 in high school. There's no way I was gonna get into that. And plus, like math, calculus, I'm cool.
Yeah,
I'll
same.
take I'll take stats. You know what I mean?
I,
Stats
I
is a
think
little
that was
more of
the
my.
bare minimum, right? You get through stats and you're done.
I'm cool. Like stats, okay, cool. Stats, perfect. I know that the mean, median. All right, no. But
We're good
on
to
a
go.
serious note, though, it's like actually me studying sociology just gave me a totally different perspective with business, even like taking qualitative methods and like interviewing people. Now I'm a podcaster. Now my discovery is A1 because I know how to ask good questions because I took qualitative methods which I would have never taken in business school, right? And so yeah, man, like I think this is message to the viewers and listeners, try to talk to people about your experience, someone you trust, someone that you respect, and try to take a report on the value that their experiences are bringing to you, because you'd probably be surprised.
I couldn't agree with you more. And at Flockjay, that's something we would always promote, right? Is like making sure people know how to tell their story and not to be, something that I always say is like, people from sort of diverse backgrounds, they're not great in spite of their differences. They're great because of them, and it's I think for a long time, like some of the things that I'm talking about with you on this podcast are things that I would never talk about, or the things that I would hide, or things I used to be ashamed of, like my background and my upbringing, the fact that like I had to go through those things when I was younger. I was embarrassed by them because they made me feel different, but now I'm proud of them because it's what has made me who I am, and it allows me to be successful, and I shouldn't and everyone should feel the same, like your experiences make you.
Same here, man. You put you to the choir. But quick question for you. So okay, so um, being in tech sales, now that you've been in this space, you're one of the leaders in this space. Is a degree even necessary? Is a college degree necessary? What's the benefit at this point?
Well, full disclosure, like I don't have one. I will say it was definitely at the time that I was getting into it much more difficult to get into sales without a degree. But today, in today's climate, for the most part, I rarely see SDRs, which is the entry level role in sales, requiring a college degree. It's college degree preferred. And at the end of the day, like if you come in and bring your A game in an interview, I don't think it would really impact you. I think maybe slightly, but much less so than it did in the past. So, I mean, honestly, I think getting a college degree, it shouldn't be something that you do for the purpose of some sort of end game or end goal. Like it should be something that you're doing because you're passionate about it and because you genuinely want to educate yourself. Like I think that's like what's kind of twisted about America today is this whole idea is like I'm gonna go study business, have no idea what I want to be, you know what I mean, or what I want to do. And I think yeah, it's more important to find like what you love in college. Like that's what it should be about. And if you know you want to be in sales, I'd say you can skip it.
No, that's good. That's a good point. All right, so let's talk about how you got into tech sales. Like, what was that talk? I mean, what was that process like? What was your? How did you even get into tech sales? Why did you choose to get into tech sales?
For sure. I mean, so like I mentioned, like I kind of become like disenchanted the whole music thing. It wasn't really going anywhere. I'm 25. Like all my friends now who I went to high school with are like, getting their big boy jobs, big girl jobs, and kind of
Hmm.
like feeling a little left out. And I was living in the city. I was actually living in my aunt's basement, and I was working three minimum wage jobs. I used to work at the Bay Club SF Tennis, which is now gone, Fifth and Brannon, and I worked the front desk there. I worked at the 7D Experience at Pier 39. I used to like clean up popcorn and stuff between rides and collect tickets, and then I worked the night shift at the Green Tortoise Hostel in North Beach. And I did all three of those jobs at the same time. It was like 60 hours a week. I used to like cry myself to sleep. And I'd call my dad and he'd be like, just everything that you do it to the best of your ability. And you will shine through. The cream rises to the top. That's what he would always tell me. And so at work one day at the tennis club, this dude walks in and I'm having a shitty day, but like I always tried to give the best customer service possible. We ended up chopping up for 30 minutes. He turned out to be like one of the like co-founders of Bay Club, like one of the executives, and he got me into sales. He got me into selling memberships at the Bay Club. And so that was like the first time that I was exposed to Salesforce and the first time I was exposed to like the actual motion of traditional sales and realized like, okay, like I have a knack for this. And while working at Bay Club, I met so many young, wealthy people, and they all worked in tech. And so that was kind of like how I was exposed to this idea of tech as a whole. Most of them were like engineers and product designers, but then I realized like, okay, there's sales in this industry too, and so I'm selling now. And so like I said, I didn't know what kind of jobs to apply for. So literally anything that had sales in the description on AngelList, I would submit my application. It was like one click to apply, and got like yeah, so I just had the resume
Shout out to
uploaded.
the one
Yeah.
click.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Applied to an obscene amount of jobs, and I got two callbacks. One, and both of them didn't call me back after the first interview, and one of them I just kept calling because they didn't tell me no. And I looked later in the lever notes, which is like how they assess you. I looked later that they had written like we're gonna interview this guy because he won't stop calling, and like that's the job. And then there were four people on the panel. Two said yes, two said no. I barely got the job.
Dang. No, that's awesome. I mean, lots of gems there. First of all, shout out to the owner of the Bay Club, for recognizing that value in you. At the end of the day, we all need someone. We all need someone to like take a chance on us a lot of times. So that's dope. And yeah, keep calling, keep dialing,
Yeah.
smiling dial.
Don't give
Like
up. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
even
don't give up.
you never know who's watching or how they might perceive what you're doing. You know what I mean? One of the guys that
Hmm.
said yes to me had seen that I worked at Zoomies, and he used to work at a bike shop.
Oh, okay.
And so he knew how like we had a sales culture, and so he gave me a lot of credit for having worked at the mall when I think a lot of people wouldn't because of his background.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Retail sales actually, there's I'm gonna give a big shout out to Nicole, my coworker. She came from the high end retail though. Though, she was selling working at Nordstrom selling, subscription services, some of those bags, but yeah, they make great sellers too because you get told no a lot. You have to so it definitely transferable skills. All right, I got a quick question for you. So, okay, so it sounds like it sounds like you were finding success at once you got into that sales role at the Bay Club. That's where you started to see success, and that's when you had that aha moment, like, wow, this is something that I can pursue. What's your aha moment in tech sales? Like, when did you have a moment like, oh, this is something that I can do, and I can be good at this? Like, at what point in your career did that moment come for you?
Honestly, I would say it's like there's kind of like these series of epiphanies that happen over the course of your career, like where you sort of like hit these different levels. And I feel like every time I was telling my friend, it's like you get good at something and you plateau, and then immediately you have to get good at something else. You have to up level, right? So I would say like the first time that I was like, wow, like I can do this was probably like after I'd been at Get Around for about 6 months. And I had found a lot of success doing, we were doing like B2C, like direct to consumer sales. And I had an idea to be able to start selling to people who were like had businesses around vehicles, like just for some background get arounds, like peer-to-peer car sharing. It's like, for like Turo or like Airbnb for your car. And we used to just call individuals to share one car. And I had an idea to start calling people who had fleets of vehicles. And I like talked with my CEO. And I used to feel so much imposter syndrome, like talking to my CEO who like, went to, like the Ivy League in Canada, it was like McGill. And then one of my COO went to like friggin' Harvard. And I was just so intimidated. And so I got the sort of like the courage. We were a little drunk. We were at an all hands. And I kind of like told him about my thoughts. And he listened to me and he rolled out my idea, across the company, and we created this new sales motion. And that was like, wow, you know what? Like I deserve the seat at the table. And that was like a really like a huge turning point for me, like not only in a career but in my life, to be seen by someone who I kind of figured would never really, I didn't feel like I deserved that respect or that recognition or that my ideas were good. And so it was really a big moment for me when that happened.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So is that the same point that there's a difference between that moment where it's like, wow, I'm great at this, and like, okay, I can contribute, to I got something to add here. Like it's like not, it's beyond being great at this. Like this industry needs me. Like what
Yeah.
point did you have that moment?
Pretty recently, honestly, like I would say, like with the FlockJ stuff, like doing mentorship and helping, like watching, I think at this point through those 3 batches, I've seen at least 40 or 50 people now that I've worked with get like career-changing, life-changing jobs. And I would say for me, like that's when I was like, wow, like the role that I'm playing here is pivotal. Like my experience is unique, and like the voice that I have like can help uplift a lot of people. And so I'd say, like, for what you were saying, like feeling like, a moment where I realized that, wow, like I'm needed here, was that.
Awesome. Yeah, I would say, yeah, it's probably the same for me too. My moment of like I belong. Well, let me see. Definitely the Flock J thing, because you get on the Flock J and you're training people to get into tech sales, and a lot of them look like you and they know nothing, and it's like you're like that for sure. And then also the podcast. When I started doing the podcast and people were say things like, oh, this has been helpful, this has been inspiring, or even the guests on the show, I love that. That's one of my favorite parts of being a podcaster. It's not necessarily like the listeners, but it's the moment of interviewing people like you, actual people who are sharing their stories with me. Because let's keep it real, the only time you get to share your story is like in an interview, and you can't really keep it all the way real, from a career perspective. And your friends, they're not going to really understand this whole tech side unless they're in tech sales with you. So, for a lot of that, I would say that's where it's like, okay, I need to be here. I need to like be a leader for, our, people that look like me in this space and collect their stories. So I would say, yeah, the podcasting for sure is when I had that moment. And this is a good transition because I want to touch on some real stuff with you. And, so the first thing that I want to talk to you about, especially because on your LinkedIn, you've had a number of different experiences, right? And so obviously we know that, I know personally, and as you go through your career, this expectation that you're going to have a fairy tale, like climbing the ladder, moving on up, moving on.
Yeah.
Bria, you got to find that song. Bria is my production manager. But you know what I'm saying? Like this whole going up the ladder, it ain't happening like that. You going
like
up the
this.
ladder, hey, the ladder break. Oh! You falling off the ladder. You done fell off the ladder. Now you on the ground on your back. My neck, this so
Square one.
You on that square one, right? And you got to get surgery. You got to, you feel me? Get back on the ladder. And so and so for you, you've had a number of experience. Can you talk to us about how do you think about opportunity? Just like, how do you even think about opportunity? How do you think about taking risks in the perspective or in like the realm of building a career?
I honestly wish I had thought about it more initially, right? I think like coming back to like being in a scarcity mindset and feeling grateful, I didn't make a plan. You know what I mean? Like I fell into my first tech job, was very happy with what I got paid because it was significantly more than what I gotten paid previously, but I wasn't thinking about what I could be getting paid, right? Nor was I thinking about how to build my career. Like when I was first selling, it wasn't a traditional software sale. And even though I was a closer, full cycle rep, I was generating millions of dollars in ARR as an individual contributor. I didn't know how to use all those acronyms and say all those words when I left that job. And so I ended up spending 3 years at that company company as a leader, and then having to basically come back into tech sales and start as an SDR again, because I interviewed at a ton of companies that basically would be like, oh, this isn't a traditional SaaS sale, or they were selling some kind of hardware or something, but then there was like a much lower ceiling, and that's not what I wanted to do. And so like looking back, like I wish that I had kind of known, right, about like the terminology, traditional progression, right? But like honestly, like for a long time, I was just like, how do I make more money? And then once I realized like, okay, I want to be an AE, I want to be an enterprise AE. I realized that when I started at Segment as an SDR again, after spending 3 years at GetAround, and when I was there, I was like, okay, now I have blinders on. Like that's exactly what I want to do. And I moved around a little bit after that point because I was just like, I was trying to get the stripes, because the way that this works in this community is like so much is based on just like the place you worked and the title that you had, and I peeped that, you know what I mean. So I was like, once I worked at Segment as a sales development rep, I had Segment on my resume, which was a huge sort of badge because they were like a very hot company, and other people were willing to give me AE jobs when Segment wasn't, because they wanted my, you know, in my knowledge from having worked there. And so I parlayed that into an enterprise AE position, and then I parlayed that into an even better one, and then I used that to get into sales leadership and operations at a company that kind of failed. So it was constantly like, how do I get up? How do I take the next step as quickly as possible? And then when I settled down and I was looking for a new role, like how I did for this current position, I used all the knowledge that I had in the past, like how to identify a great leader, how to look for great funding, how to look for a product market fit, and basically sat down and like made a list of like 5 companies that I thought fit the bill, and then reached out to those people and made those applications. So now I'm like very intentional, but for a long time I really wasn't, and I wish that I had been.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. Wow, so much stuff to unpack there. I kind of want to just let it marinate for a little bit because I think there's lessons in just that story. You know, people read between the lines, but a couple things that really stood out for me is well, the first one is just the education component, and like that's really not much you can control, Justin, because you feel me, like you're the only one that's in tech sales, so you kind of unfortunately, but fortunately, have had to learn things the hard way. And, you know, and that's same with me. Like I remember I was in sales working for Sunrun, you know, and it's a consumer product because I'm selling one. It's not an ARR or SaaS model, but these contracts were $10,000 to $50,000, you know, for a solar system on somebody's house. You know what I mean? And I'm a closer, not just going door knocking, you know. And unfortunately, because I didn't have anyone in tech, I didn't have Flockj or anything. I'm like, oh, I'm about to go to this tech company as an SDR. And although, because in tech, the money is just so much greater. Like I went from making like 35 base as a closer in the solar industry to making 50 as an SDR. I'm like, shit, I'm getting a raise. But when I got there, I'm like, oh, and I'm like just killing. So I'm just selling the meet. I'm booking meetings. And then I'm looking across the field, seeing my AE peers, and they're having similar conversations just about a product that I was having. I'm like, oh, I'm overqualified for this. And of course, you know, it takes a great leader to see that. So, oh, this person is overqualified. They don't see in themselves what they can do, but I see it in them, and let me just help them. It takes a great leader to do that, and unfortunately, that just wasn't the case at that first company. So I think a lot of what you're saying is just like that education piece, and people like you, people like me, different companies out there are helping with that. You know what I mean? And this is something I'm passionate about. But yeah, you know, in terms of, you know, getting like valuing opportunities, you're spot on though. Like I think that's definitely the way to go nowadays. It's like you got to leave, I mean, you know, and to get what you want to level up if you're not getting it at your organization, you know what I mean? So, and you
Yeah, I
make
think the whole idea of like, oh, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was gonna say you make a great point too, as far as like, you know, as you've grown in your career, you've moved beyond just, okay, who's going to pay me the most or who has the best salary. It's like, okay, what's the leadership like? What's the market for this particular product, right? And so you're taking more things into consideration.
Yeah. I think everybody, you know, you have to ask yourself what you want. Like for me, like the money has always been important, duh. But like once you get past that, like one of my personal goals, like since I got into tech, like I've always wanted to be part of a major event. You know what I mean? I've always wanted to
An
work at a
IPO?
company, like an IPO or a big acquisition, and to be able to say that I was one of the early salespeople that I helped build that. Like that's always been a personal goal for me. And like I've seen, like at Segment, like I came kind of later on in the progression of the company. They were already a unicorn, and I saw like the people who had been there since Series B, and like just the way that they were so entrenched in the organization, and how much personal gain they stood to make, not only financially, but just like the feeling that you get from working really hard at a goal with a bunch of other people together, your friends, and then achieving this monumental thing. Like that's what I really want for my career. Like that's my what I'm striving for, but everybody's different, you know what I mean? And so like you have to just take into account what you really want.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you're in a position where you can help those Series B companies because you have so much experience. I'm working for a startup too, so that's exactly the reason why I chose to work for a startup. Is same thing. Okay, so talk to me a little bit about, we talked about your upbringing and how like you've had to straddle between socioeconomic backgrounds, but like talk to me about being black and in tech sales. Like let's have that conversation. What's what's been your experience, and yeah.
I mean, first of all, I mean like I'm a great code switcher, right? Like you can tell I've got my proper voice down.
Cause when you're young and black, you develop a knack for putting the world at ease. It's called code switching, and I'm a master of the dial.
You know what I mean? And so like, and then on top of that, I'm kind of like racially ambiguous. And what I always think is funny is like people don't want to, like a lot of people that I've worked with will be like, oh, you're black? Oh, I never thought of you as black. You know what I mean? Or, things like that, these like small microaggressions that you have to deal with, I think more so from coworkers and things like that than anything else. But I think what's tough about it is just like, I don't know, maybe you could probably relate to this. Like, have you, another black person gets hired at your office, it's automatic, like, what's up? How you doing, bro? You surviving out here? Like, it's just like this understanding that you have that that like
Yeah.
you're not being your authentic self in work all the time. You bite your tongue when people say things that upset you, right? Like just the other day, like Kyle Rittenhouse got off, right? Like nobody at my office talks about that. That's not going on Slack. Like, nobody, that shit hurt me. I shed tears over that on the BART. You know what I mean? Riding home. It deeply affected me. You know what I mean? And no, it deeply affected other black people in the community too, right? And like, but that's just like not something that's going to be talked about or that will have any impact on most of the people that we work with. And so it's kind of like that sort of thing that it kind of just reminds you that you're not amongst people that understand you. And you can't always be your true authentic self. And so that's difficult, and that's like what I think the work that we do with FlockJ and the work you're doing with this podcast, like we're helping to slowly make changes there to help people have more understanding.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because at the end of the day, we're all people. And the Kyle Rittenhouse thing, yeah, definitely. And it's not even like, oh, he got off for killing a couple or people. It's like it was like a reminder, like how the world is different for us. like I think that's why people of colors especially were like just like wow, because we know like a little boy got murdered for having a fake gun.
Tamir Rice.
And you know what I mean? And this guy killed people.
I mean, you look at
it's just different.
Khalif Browder. I mean, that one, I know Jay-Z made a documentary about it. I don't know if you saw. He was accused of stealing a backpack, got locked in Rikers Island for, I think, like 3 years and ended up killing himself over being accused of theft. You know what I mean? And it's just like, just the incredible disparity in our criminal justice system is just like something that, I've even in my adult life had multiple encounters in police that have ended with me in handcuffs with 0 charges, right? Because of the assumptions that are made. I've been called Johnny Cochran by the police twice on 2 separate occasions, once in San Jose and once in San Francisco, because I'm defending myself, and I'm saying, you don't have a right to, who do you think you are, Johnny Cochran? I'm like, wow, a well-spoken black man, I'm Johnny Cochran? That's who you think of, with the guy who got OJ off? Like,
Right.
Unreal.
Right. He thought he was funny for that. But okay, this actually, let's parlay this back in the tech sales. Like I think the Kyle Rittenhouse thing. Okay, now this podcast getting real.
I got a little tangential. Sorry.
About 40 minutes in, that's when it typically happens. But all right, I think for me at least, the Kyle Rittenhouse thing, the big thing was like, it's a reflection of how just unfair society is when it comes to the criminal justice system, right? Now, what are some things that we see in tech sales that usually doesn't fly if you look like us, but flies if you don't look like us? You know what I mean? Like, are there things top of mind that you've seen that's like, wow, if I did that, or like, then it would be consequences, or, I wouldn't work here. Like, what are some things?
Man, that's a tough question. I'd say like I'm just, man, I don't know. You got me kind of stumped with that one. Like, I feel like
That's
I'm
the
so conditioned. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't even think in those sort of terms. I'm trying to think like what would I feel like I couldn't do that other people can do. I don't know. Do you have anything that comes to mind?
Well, there's one thing that comes. I mean, so for me, actually, when I think about, when I think about my career in tech sales, first of all, I'm usually the only black person on the team, but I'm also usually a top performer. Like my entire career, I've been on top of the leaderboard, and so I think being average is just something like being like just a performer or being a seller. Like, you feel me? Like, is not as accepted. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're black, you know what I mean? It's like almost like the expectations are even higher for some odd reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, I've always been kind of a top performer too, and I think like the expectation is one that I put on myself, and I think that kind of comes back to, the experience of being black too. I think growing
Right.
up, that's something that was always told to me by my parents, like you have to do it better because they're going to assume that you're not going to be good enough. And so I've
Hmm.
always had that pressure on myself to make sure that like I didn't mispronounce things because someone would assume that that's me being stupid, not me making a mistake. You know what I
Right.
mean? Or like
Right.
feeling like if I'm not performing, then someone would assume that I'm lazy. But I don't know how much that has to do with like the outside versus me versus my own like issues with it. You know what I mean? Like, because
Yeah.
I always put that pressure on myself, and I know a lot of that comes from being black and growing up in white spaces for sure.
Yeah, but I also think that, I mean, have you ever worked with an average like or subpar black seller? Because I honestly, I think that, like, yes, we put that pressure on ourselves, but it's got to be some truth to it. If like if there's less black people on sales teams, but the black people that are on sales teams usually perform really well. So to me, that says that like if you ain't upper echelon, if you're not Justin, if you're not Robert, then you're not going to get a job just as a seller. You know what I mean? So.
That's crazy to think about. I've actually never thought about it like that. And come to think of it, because you asked me about other black sellers, I've actually never worked with another black seller on my team. That's never happened. The only other black sellers I've known, like in the same organization, were either also sales managers or on adjacent teams, and they were top performers. But yeah, like that's wild, and that's kind of I've never really thought about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And speaking of this topic, so Salesloft held a webinar recently. I don't know if you were on it, but it was basically just, it was being black and being in sales, and they had a couple leaders from our space, Shelton Banks and um, damn, I'm blanking on his name. Forgive me, but they're in this Slack channel called Sales for the Culture. But one thing
Oh,
that they
I'm
mentioned.
familiar. I'm on that.
Oh, you're on that? Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
dope. One thing they mentioned was that that more often than not, they feel like discriminated against or have some sense of like disrespect or racism with buyers, not necessarily internally. Have you ever experienced any form of like, just uncomfortability or like, disrespect when you're trying to sell your product to a company?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had people not trust me at my word before, and I can't for sure attribute that to what that may be, but like I've definitely been questioned, I think more so than some of my colleagues, and you can see that a lot when you look at like Gong and Chorus, because you can actually analyze it, look at other people's calls. But I've definitely experienced that in the past, and I've definitely also experienced sort of like just like a general sense of distrust from particularly like older buyers. But I would say from younger folks, it's not as common. But yeah, I mean, kind of like a similar to like what women describe with like mansplaining. You know what I mean? Where someone kind of like will talk over me or come over my head. And like I said, like I'd like to think that maybe that contributed to my youth as opposed to my being black. But yeah, I mean, I definitely would say that I've seen that more often than other colleagues.
And youth is another aspect of like just our identity, really, and that's just the fact of the matter is people are going to have bias. In tech sales, to be honest with you, I haven't really experienced someone just flat out saying something racist on the sales call, like, you know what I mean? Like,
No.
or that like blatantly disrespectful. But I would say, in my, just to share a little bit of my experience. So when I was selling
Yeah.
solar, Justin, back in the day, straight out of college, I was going to people's homes. And Justin, my territory was the peninsula. So the peninsula, very wealthy people, very homogenous for the most part. We're talking about Palo Alto, San Mateo, Foster State, like all these areas, old money. And, selling solar, I'm in their house. And so the hardest part, or the part where there will be some sense of uncomfortability, is usually when you knock on that door. You know what I mean? Because and it's also, we're talking about, like, this is very personal. You're in people's homes. So in that part of my sales career, I will definitely say, like, I felt like, I don't know if it's just me mentally or if it's, if there is some energy there, but I've always felt like knocking on someone's door, depending on who this person is, it'd be like and, then once you speak with them, once you start to diagnose their needs, and once you start to help them, then it's like, okay, I like you. And so I would say it's usually just overcoming those initial biases that people might have is the hardest part, the challenge when it comes to sales. And honestly, I think being black helps me in sales. Like, I think, you know what I mean? Like, past that potential bias aspect, I think being black helps because,
I think
yeah.
particularly like in the last few years, like this is one of the positive thing that's come out of just like more awareness around like issues that Black people are facing in society, that like people who in the past I think would not be as cognizant of the things that they say, even if they're not like bad people or racist people, but like microaggressions just happen, right? But like people are I think a lot more self-aware today than they were even 3 to 5 years ago, which I'm super thankful for. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I feel like the environment has changed a lot from when we first started to today.
Yeah, progress is being made. Progress is being made. Wow, man, this is interesting conversations we're having here. So okay, let's bring it back to today, right? Because you're working on some big things, and you're currently working at Pave as an account executive. And I looked into Pave, and I think what they're doing is pretty cool with the whole like compensation. And so I'm sure you have some insider secrets. I'm just curious, is there like a secret or two that you can share with job seekers around pay and compensation, specifically for salespeople? Is there any tips you would give based off of your knowledge, your personal experience, based off of working in this industry, dealing with HR leaders? What should people know about pay and compensation as they're, thinking about getting a new job?
In today's job market, as I'm sure many people are aware, like this is a market for job seekers, right? Like people really need jobs. So everyone who is offering jobs, like I talk to HR leaders all day, they assume that you have 2 or 3 offers and they know that there's going to be competition. So don't be afraid to negotiate for your base salary off top. And then also, the great part about working at a startup is receiving options, but understand that options are not guaranteed. You don't even own them. You just have the option to buy them, right? That's what that means. And make sure that wherever you're going, that they're willing to tell you what's the strike price and what's the preferred price so that you can figure out how much of that company you actually have a piece of, and just really get into that. And if people are being hesitant with you about giving you the information and letting you know not how many shares you're getting, but what's the actual dollar value of those shares, then don't take the job, because there's so many other jobs out there right now. Like, don't be afraid to negotiate for your base. They expect it, and be weary of anyone who doesn't want to tell you what these options are actually worth, because they might not be worth shit. And I tell you, one company might be offering you 10,000 options, another offers 5,000. Doesn't matter how many options, it matters what they're worth.
Good point. Okay. And so appreciate that. You recently embarked on an entrepreneurial journey with Blue Blaze Partners. You want to talk a little bit about that, what you're up to with that? And
Yeah, for sure. I just got really into crypto mining, really into crypto as a whole. Like last year, I was a little late to the game. I'd kind of dabbled, but really started to like dive into it. And I want to do mining. And at first, I want to do it at home, and then realize it's not cost effective. And then I wanted to build a rig, and realize like, holy crap, this takes like a lot of technical know-how. And so I like crowdsource information from my network and spent a lot of time on Reddit and all this stuff. And I ended up setting up my own mining at a co-location, right, like at a data center. And then after I did that, I had a lot of people who basically were asking me like, hey, how do I get involved? And so I realized that what exists is like a desire for people to get involved in mining, but there's this huge barrier to entry in terms of technical acumen as well as like upfront costs that a lot of people don't have. And so what I'm trying to do basically is work with people to help them, first of all, get more information. I'm always down to chat. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I will hop on a Zoom with anybody and just talk crypto for 20, 30 minutes. And then my end goal is to be able to take money from people in the form of investments to be able to continue to grow the infrastructure of the mine and then allocate a portion of that to the people who are investing. And so right now I'm still trying to figure out like legally how to accomplish that. There are a few different routes, all of which I'm exploring, but for the time being have been working only with like friends and family and close people. But if anybody out there is interested in learning more about the opportunities around mining, please reach out to me. I'm happy to chat about it.
For sure, for sure. Definitely take them up on that. And I'm curious. So, that's big that you have you're obviously in tech sales, but you also have this, this side entrepreneurial gig that you're passionate about as well. When would you say is the right time to even explore entrepreneurship? When you've been a contributor and operator your entire life, like when's a good time to say, okay, let me explore being an entrepreneur and starting something up?
I would say like I've tried way too early too many times, and this one is yet to be seen, right? Who knows how it'll go? But I feel like every time I take a swing, the thing that really helps me to improve is my network and knowing enough people. So I think like do whenever you have an idea, you should explore it, regardless of where you are in your career. But do proper due diligence. Understand like the space, first of all, like who are your competitors, understand what's going to be required of you. And if you don't have all the pieces that you need, go out and find who can contribute, like delegate, you know what I mean? Like that's the key. And so when you're at a place where you have enough resources to be able to delegate to get it done, and if you've done your due diligence and know that you have the bandwidth, then do it, but be honest with yourself. I think the mistake that I've made in the past is like making out something to be way easier than it is and not like mapping out all of the steps in detail. And then end up kind of like overwhelming myself or just like kind of getting lost in the shuffle. So yeah, like I would say there's no like exact right time, but when you're making that assessment, like be honest, do your due diligence.
Okay, yeah, that's a good answer. Speaking of like crypto, and I want to combine the crypto and what you do as an accounting executive. So, would you ever take your commission checks in crypto? Is that something you would consider?
I honestly feel like that whole thing is like publicity stunts on the parts of athletes and politicians. Because at the end of the day, like I don't
Yeah,
know, like I still got bills to pay. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, yeah.
anytime I invest in crypto, it's not coming out. I'm in for the long haul, right? So if I was
Right.
getting my paycheck in crypto, I'd be very hard pressed to make withdrawals. You know what I mean? So
Okay.
I would rather get my paycheck in cash, and I will allocate whatever portion I feel is fit of that cash to go into my crypto investments. But yeah, no, I don't think I would honestly. I don't really see the benefit.
Yeah, right. Because you can just buy it unless it's like an employee stock purchase program, where you get like a look back, and so like
Yeah.
they're paying you based off of the block of the Bitcoin price months ago. You know what I mean? That might be cool.
That'd be cool. Or like
Uh,
if you're Odell Beckham, right? Like he's taking his salary, right? But he doesn't touch his salary, so essentially it's just auto investing, right?
right.
In his because he's gonna live off of his endorsements, whatever. But like
Exactly.
I live off my salary, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, I got you. I got you. So blockchain, crypto, like this whole space is really disrupting a lot, right? And we got this Web 3.0. This is the future of everything. Do you have any, looking into the future, do you have any thoughts on how this technology will impact the future of, the sales profession?
I haven't really given it much thought. I think firstly, there's just going to be way more opportunities to sell all kinds of stuff. You know what I mean? I think there's just going to be all different types of products. Like the other day, I just went on GoDaddy and started buying as many URLs that started with Meta as I could. Uh, yeah, because I was just like, man, I bet you like, there's gonna be a lot of people want to start websites. I got like metacashexchange.com. Like I got like a bunch of different metas, you know what I mean? And so the way my wheels are turning is like there's just gonna be all these new industries in the metaverse, and I think that will impact salespeople too. Who knows? Like I'm not that forward thinking, but I guarantee that there's just gonna be way more opportunity for salespeople as this new sort of technology segment starts to blossom.
I wonder if there'll be a domain .meta. I wonder if that even exists.
That's a good question. I have no idea.
We're uncovering some deep stuff. I might have to wait a year to release this episode.
One eternity later.
You know, But you know what I mean? But okay. No, this has all been really cool, man. This has been some interesting, fascinating conversations. Now, it's all about having fun, right? And I got a game for us to play to wrap this up.
Okay.
And unfortunately, there's no winning. It's actually, the game is called the lose-lose game. All right, so I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and you just have to, tell me which one you'd rather, pick, okay?
Okay.
All right, so the first one is, okay, as a seller, you have a great discovery and horrible negotiation call. Like, great discovery, but horrible with negotiations, or horrible discovery, but great with the negotiation.
I'll take the latter. Because if we got to negotiations, that means discovery may have been horrible, but it was good enough that they entered a negotiation conversation. If we negotiate well, we can still close.
Okay. All right. There we go. All right. Product market fit and below market commission payout. So your product is flying off the wall, but the commission structure, or no product market fit, but above average commission payout.
I'll take the former on that one too, because if I've had the experience where you don't have good product market fit and you're competing against somebody and getting 20% commission too. I had this exact same thing happen to me, but who cares if you get 20% of deals you're not closing? I'd rather be getting a lower commission and having the product fly off the shelves.
Okay, cool. Okay. Also, because if you're not selling anything, that you might start to look inward, especially if you don't have the wisdom to say, what the hell, this my competitors, they have a better product. So.
Right.
All right. Becoming a master. All right, you're gonna love this one. Becoming a master at trading cryptocurrencies, but ignorant to stock investments, or a master at the stock market, but ignorant to crypto.
Ooh, that's hard. I would say master of crypto, ignorant to stock, because cryptos is the future. I don't even know where the U.S. dollar is going to be in by the time my life ends, so we'll see.
Okay, good point. All right, being an SDR at a great company, or being an AE at a mediocre company?
For a long time, I would have said AE, a mediocre company, but honestly, I'd rather take SDR at a great company, because you will learn so much more to build that foundation for your career when you make the jump to AE, whereas you're not really going to learn a ton. You're going to figure out a ton. You're going to have a ton of responsibilities, wear a lot of hats, but you're not going to have a ton of mentorship and guidance. So I would rather take SDR at an excellent sales org.
Okay. All right. VP of sales with no side. So this is you. You're the VP of sales, making bank. VP of sales with no side gig. So you can never, embark on an entrepreneurial venture. Or you're the top AE with an option to have a side gig.
No knocking anybody. I think both of these are great. There isn't one right answer. It's super personal. But for me, I would take the AE with side gig. Just I don't want to be a sales lifer. I don't want to be doing this. By the time I'm 40 something. And I think at the end of the day, as a top contributing IC, you end up making more money than a lot of sales leaders, and then can have that flexibility to still make money elsewhere.
Okay, yeah, good point. Yeah, there's more than life than just being that title, right? Being an entrepreneur, I'm sure, as you know, it gives you a different energy, But hey,
it gives you more options, right? You don't want all your eggs in one basket.
Right. Yeah, true. And you have more control over your destiny, you know what I mean? You're your own boss, right? And so,
Exactly.
But hey, Justin, man, this has been a great episode. I'm close to saying this might even be another classic. I'm on the road. But yeah, for real though, Justin, I really appreciate you joining the show, man. This has been really great. You have a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience, and greatly appreciate you giving back to my audience and to me personally. So again, thank you for your time, and all the best to you on your future endeavors.
Yo, thank you. Same to you. And honestly, I'm super, super grateful for the opportunity to be able to have a space where I could kind of share my story. And I'm sorry for going off on a bunch of tangents, social justice, but I can't help it. But I really appreciate the opportunity. It's been awesome, and looking forward to now we're homies now, so we're gonna kick it off the podcast.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, you're welcome to come back. You need announcements you need to make. You know what I'm saying? My platform is your platform. So. Yeah, man, anytime, you're welcome.
I remember when the vision wasn't as clear. I don't think they thought
thought that I would make it, but motherfuck they thoughts, cause I'm here, I'm here. Now we here for the taking, yeah. My God.